everyone. I'm the person between your lunch, so I better make this worth it, right? So let's get started. So, as Melby said, why do we care about this topic, right? So I'm going to introduce myself, Shweta Saraf. I've worked at a number of companies, but like what I want to highlight is I've worked in different organizations, which are like startups, pre-IPOs, took them to IPO, took them through acquisitions to post-IPO, and now hyperscalers. So I really draw from a variety of experience, which hopefully all of you can relate to some part of it. And experience-wise, I've been building teams, both platform and product teams, and essentially in the whole cloud infra space, networking, data center technologies, and anything at scale, right? But most importantly, my mission in life is to really create a best environment where people can do the best work of their lives. So that's my ethos and how I really do everything I do, no matter which company it is. So with that, what are we going to do today? Today, I'm going to focus on why do we care as leaders to foster innovation. Then I'm going to talk about some practical tips that hopefully you can walk away with and apply in your setting and foster innovation. Talk about some of the frameworks and deep dive into how we do things at Netflix using these frameworks. And last but not least, I want to end with, yes, all this sounds great, but like how do you actually get it funded? How do you get into roadmap and how do you actually have tangible results, right? So that's pretty much what we're going to do. So to kick it off, how many of you have worked with platform teams or are part of a platform team? Okay, so this is not a strange slide for you. Your life is filled with dealing with tech debt. You have to keep the lights on, so operational load is a big part of how you plan your work or your team's work. And then there's always initiatives around efficiency, availability, resilience, right? And as your scale increases, as your customers increases, as your offerings increases, these things keep coming back up. They're not one and done. Then, as a platform team, the most important job you have is to create value, to create leverage. And you can only do that when you're investing in building features and capabilities that your customers care about, whether they are internal customers or they are end customers, right? And bane of everybody's existence is how do you get what you build to be adopted? How do you do the migrations? That's bane of everybody's existence. Nobody loves it. So with all that in mind, let's talk about innovation. Maybe I'll take one hand. What does innovation mean to you? Any brave volunteers? Yes. Yes. So it's not always about the fanfare. It's not like new, shiny idea which has to go from idea to patent or to production. I mean, yes, that's innovation too, but it's really different way of thinking, different way of creatively solving a problem, a business problem or a technical problem, right? So with that in mind, for innovation, what you need is growth mindset. You need to be okay to fail fast. You need to be okay to fail often. And then you need to learn from the failure. It's easier said than done. And it's very hard when you are a platform team always trying to do more with less headcount. So in order to get innovation mindset going, what is needed is investment in experimentation, investment in taking big, bold bets. And then how do you really fuel new ideas to be generated when you're in the midst of on-call or trying to fix issues or trying to go deep into migrations? And the key to that is aligning innovation with business problems. So why are we here? Because those two things are always at odds. When you want to do platform work, innovation, what it needs are always at odds. Hence, I chose this topic for my talk. So I'm going to walk through a simple diagram which talks about how necessity can be a trigger for innovation, right? So this is the journey of my team. So what I do for my day job, if you go home and start your Stranger Things and want to Netflix and chill, everything that moves the traffic from when you go to netflix.com or your app, all the way to the point when we actually do the selection of the title and start playing it, that all traffic goes to my team's work. So there's a lot that happens under the hood. But the slide here really highlights that we have been one of the biggest consumers of public cloud. And it has been a long journey. And along that journey, We have had a lot of scale issues that have cropped up. So when that happens, it creates a sense of urgency. It creates inspiration for engineers to think outside of the box and do it. So this is a most common way of how innovation happens organically. But in this case, what I want to highlight is as we started seeing the scale and the subscribers growing to hundreds of millions and more, we also started seeing the dynamicity in our load. That required network to keep up with the compute and what our customers wanted. So this was an example of where we co-innovated with AWS. The engineers on both teams worked on IPv6 prefix delegation, and that eventually led to the point where today, I'm proud that most of these flows are now going through IPv6 and we have a new architecture. But I mean, my point of this whole slide is that when there's a business need, doing innovation is easy. How do you do it proactively as a leader? So the first framework I'm going to talk about is Ideathons. I'm sure some of you have heard of it, some of you have done them, but the idea is simple. It's 1 week of ideation within your org, or whatever the scope you want to set. Everybody can cross-collaborate. They have to submit a one-pager describing the idea, and then they get 5 minutes to pitch their idea, kind of like Shark Tank, right? And then we follow it up by voting. So the reason I like this is because it's very low cost. It takes very little time and energy for you to pull it off, but it has very high returns. It can foster great cross-collaboration between your teams if you have teams that are working in silos and are not really innovating together. But most importantly, when I joined Netflix, one thing I wanted to start doing more of is how can everyone think big? How can everyone stop looking at what they're doing on day-to-day basis, but really take a look at the bigger picture and dream big, right? But then the most important thing is the business outcome. We did this, and we funded 40% of ideas. This was democratization of idea generation, because great ideas come from everyone. And it's very easy for a leader to stand up and say, hey, this is the new thing we invest in, Gen AI or whatever. But it's very powerful when you can harness the creativity and innovation mindset from your team. So it wasn't just like fanfare. You had an event, you gave these trophies, which is pretty cool, by the way. But it was also about putting your money where your mouth is, actually funding those ideas, actually putting them into strategy, actually investing people and headcount for it. So that was one example. The second one, this is the more common one, right? Everybody has done hack days or hackathons. So what did we do differently? In my time here, we got very focused on a theme. We said we're going to do efficiency. People can do any kind of hack, but it has to solve an efficiency problem. So again, that led a lot of cross-collaboration between security, network, compute, data, a lot of teams coming together. Now, to pull off a thing like this, it's medium cost, because it requires a lot of prep, a lot of networking to get teams going and all that. But again, the returns are high, because teams not only think of ideas, they actually implement them and validate them, which is even more powerful than just writing it down. So again, to bring it home, why did we do this? What did we gain out of it? Bunch of ideas that came out of this hack days, they generated 10x ROI. I mean, considering the amount of efforts we spent to make this happen, that's solid ROI generation right there, which wouldn't have happened if we didn't do it. And then collectively, all these ideas accumulated hundreds of millions of dollars of saving for us from an efficiency perspective. So I would say, like, hackathons are not new, but getting focused, trying it to business outcome is sort of the common theme that you're going to see here. So, all right. The next one I want to talk about is time-boxed experiments. Until now, we talked about like a time in point event, which has fanfare, which has celebration, which has people coming together. All that is good. But in order to organically scale this, you don't need that. You need to, as a leader, create a culture of innovation. And for that, what ends up happening is normally a brilliant engineer thinks of a project or an idea, wants to get it kickstarted, gets somewhat funding, but then it quickly turns into a 2+ year project that nobody understands. Why are we doing this? Why do we care? And at some point, it just goes down the list of things that we don't do anymore or get cut. So a way to solve for that is to really get focused on what are the bets that you're making? What is the analysis of ROI if we even go through an experiment that we are going to gain out of this? And then you bring it home by setting clear goals, time boxing it. Because the success of this is not how much of these experiments succeeded, right? It's like, what did we learn from them? Which experiments are the ones we will invest in versus which ones are the ones that we would not? So that's equally important because sometimes people just think every POC, every idea, every investment has to be funded and it has to succeed. Like there is no fail-safe mechanism or there's no way to back out. But when you do experiments, you set clear goals, you set clear success criteria, and the way we did it was we created a virtual team of skill sets of engineers who had different skills, kernel skills, app skills, system skills. They all came together, they were united by a common goal, and they worked really hard to prove what was the hypothesis that they had to begin with. How does it perform in production? What problems does it solve? And then at the end of time box, we use all that data, we combine that with judgment and experience, and then make a decision on, hey, was it successful or not? Do we keep investing, or do we weave it back into the roadmap at this point? But then that's the most important thing, like going into this and knowing that not all bets are going to be successful. You should be comfortable with that. And it really requires somebody in a leadership role to do that because organically it's very hard for people to pitch things which will not always succeed, right? So again, we talked about the culture. So to keep reiterating, we need to sort of think of this as an iterative process. How do we build the muscle? How do we weave it back into the experimentation stage, into the product lifecycle or software lifecycle? Because when we do this, we also engage with other folks like product teams or design teams or end consumers. So it's not just done by engineering-based innovation. It has like this end business value. So with that in mind, just a reminder, if you don't innovate, you will die. Think of so many companies in the valley, which probably, like BlackBerry, for example, you had one maybe many years back, but now where is it? You'll become a dinosaur, right? So innovation is almost like existential crisis. If you don't do that, it is just not gonna be giving you any leverage or advantage for your business to succeed. And especially for things like platform that can be way down in the stack or not very well understood, my call to action for all of you is that you as leaders make time for this, build this into strategy, but also bring it home by getting some quick wins, delivering results, and then once you do that, you kind of create the effect where it will keep multiplying, it will grow by itself. So next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the role of open source in innovation. So I'm sure you all have used open source, but I also want you to think about when you do innovation, there is like the pace at which you can move can totally change based on your approach. Are you going to build this all by yourself? Is there an element of using open source? Is there an element of contributing back to the open source, which can be very exciting for the engineers, right? So the reason why we do this is because it's not just code, it's community. You can get thought leadership and acceleration from multiple different organizations, not just yours, and build something which can make a difference for the industry. So some of the examples that specific to my team are, like we use Envoy to drive service mesh, which runs all service-to-service traffic for Netflix, and we are on that journey. The other one, which really proud of the team who created Zool. Zool is basically the API proxy that fronts all of Netflix. So all of Netflix traffic goes through this, and what started out as a project became an open source project now, which is used by other industry players as well. There are many such examples. I just picked the ones for my team, but Spinnaker is another one that comes to mind. And last but not least, we are also doing a lot of experimentation with eBPF and investing in it. We are very, very excited with all the work that's happening in industry around that. So remember, if you do this and create opportunities, it also pays back rich dividends because it helps with your hiring, it helps with retaining talent. So the next thing I want to kind of talk a little bit about is, all this sounds great, but how do you actually do it? Because, as Peter said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You may have the best strategy in the world, but if you do not have a culture of innovation, it doesn't matter. It's not going to stick. It will just be something you write on the paper. So, in terms of that, what I'm going to talk about is rivers of thinking. I don't know how many of you have heard about this, but most of the times this happens when, whether a leader or engineers, when they get into a session, whiteboarding session or whatever, people have a set mindset of this is how things work. And once you start thinking in that direction, that becomes your river of thinking. I mean, it could be anything. It could be like what movie I want to watch. You have a thought, and it kind of builds on that. So how do you develop the capability of moving from one river of thinking to another river of thinking? It's really hard to do, but if you can figure this out, it will help you make very objective, data-driven decisions and allow you to be adaptable to any situation that you face. So this is almost like a tooling to think about how do you generate those capabilities or ideas that will drive a culture which will foster innovation. So I mean, I'm going to go forward and then come back, but like Edward Bono wrote a lot of material on this. And one way to kind of simplify it is these are sort of the different hats, right? So when you're trying to solve a problem, maybe you are tuned to thinking about it in one way. And oftentimes what I do is, yes, I am someone who will have strong opinions about a lot of things, but I want to hold them loosely. So I create space for my teams to say, challenge, let's have a debate, let's have a discussion, and then we can make a decision, right? It's not other way around. If you walk into the room thinking you have made a decision, and then you want people to debate, that's not healthy, because then that's not the outcome you're looking for. So this is sort of a technique to think about when you're trying to bring innovation in your teams. How do you really create different ways of thinking which can lead to these different outcomes? So it's hard to practice, but once you do, it really provides rich dividends because it fundamentally helps you as a person to look at any situation objectively and have adaptability to think from other person's point of view or think from optimizing for like reliability or optimizing for breaking new ground or things like that. So again, just to sort of bring it all back home, culture is the most important piece. Do not ignore that. If you do that, then no matter how many hack days or ideathons or whatever you do, they will just be that. Like you will not see the results coming out of it. They will not be sticky. So with that, I'm just going to leave you guys with the 3 learnings that we talked about and happy to take any questions after that. But remember, like any type of platform team, priorities and innovation are going to be at odds. So if you're a leader of any sort, whether you're a staff engineer or you're a manager or a director, this has to be a priority for you. Because if you don't, it's just going to get lost. And I've talked about few innovation frameworks. These are pretty simple ones for you to make them your own and apply in your organization or in your setting. And then finally, think about the rivers of thought and how do you break that trap. Because once you start doing that, you can affect a culture where failures are celebrated, where wins are celebrated, but learnings are celebrated even more. So that's pretty much it, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Shweta, for those pearls of wisdom. One thing that I kind of took out from that learning side of things is remove the fear of failure. Every failure is a learning at the end of the day, so good quote there. Let's start with the questions here. I don't know if you have time for all of them, but we'll go by the votes. The first one here, what metrics or criteria are considered when evaluating the ROI of innovation bets in the platform space at Netflix?
Yeah, it's a good one. So the common ones that we know are space and Dora metrics, but when it comes to infrastructure, we actually look at the efficiency metrics, right? Like what is the cost per subscriber of running something? What is the net cost that we are saving? Or what's the availability or latency that we are saving? So cost is a very big one, but there's also like metrics around how does it affect experience around simplification or the cognitive load on the developers.
Cool. Going to the next one here.
Just gonna grab some water.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
How do you socialize that not all experiments succeed? I've seen strong patterns of only making bets that are a sure thing and stifling innovation. So how do you balance that?
Yeah. So I think this is an important one because if you're a product team, there's enough data, right? Like Airbnb, for example, or even Netflix product teams. There's sort of published data on how much experimentation they do in terms of user preferences, ML models, Gen AI, and all that. But like in platform space, it's hard because not everybody groks it. So I would say that it is hard. I don't have a perfect answer for you, but if you make a solid business case, which is well-rounded in ROI, and you're able to kind of put your money where your mouth is, it will slowly stick. Like you do have to do a bunch of road shows or selling to make people understand, because you can't assume like your higher most engineering leader gets why there is leverage in creating this experiment for platform. Like you're close to that world. So it's your responsibility to communicate that.
Yeah, adding on to that, Sweta, I think you kind of nailed it there. It's more about like you know what improvements you're kind of making in your system at the end of the day. So presenting that with data to kind of back it up to say this is exactly the metric that we will move, and that needs a little bit of like backup and research and all that sort of stuff to kind of come up with those data. I think that would be the selling point at the end of the day.
Yeah, and when you don't succeed, also talking about learnings in the same vein, right? Like we always talk about like what did people do well, but also what did we learn or what we did not do well, very transparently. So I think it takes effort to create that. So yeah, agreed.
Thank you. Going to the next one here. How does Netflix ensure the sustainability of an open source driven innovation in a rapidly changing tech landscape?
There are two sides of the coin, right? Like if you're a startup starting to get going in 2023, you have so many options. Like you can just you don't really need to care about a server network or whatever. You can go with a low code or a no code platform and just deploy it and get started, right? Or just have the AI tools do it for you. But the one way we think about it is there are very few things that work at Netflix scale. So for us, when we do these buy versus build decisions, we also think of there are no tools in the market that will solve what we need at our scale. The features are very bespoke. So that's one part of it. But when we do open source innovations like Envoy or Zool are great examples where engineers, whenever they do something around HTTP, H2 subsetting work, which was a cool feature to avoid churn in connections, we then pushed it back to the community, right? So that's how we do it. Like where it makes sense, we keep pushing back to the community, but most of it is acknowledging what's your perimeter. Like if you're a startup, it's easy to pick open source tooling and then replace it as you grow. But if you are an established company, maintaining that sustainability is a challenge. So we pick and choose our battles.
And I have a follow up to that essentially is that if you see a new open source tool or something out there, do you think of going and replacing your bespoke made tooling or?
Yeah, so we don't always do that. And actually, Bruce, my colleague, spoke about this yesterday. But there are areas like, for example, GraphQL, right? That's an area where we are doing that with intention, right? So there are a few things like that which are very intentionally driven where we do it. But generally, we look at the ROI analysis. And most of the times, can we just replace a off-the-shelf observability tool? No, that ROI never adds up. So.
Thank you. Going to the next one here, how does Netflix assess the security and compliance implications of open source solutions in a platform development effort?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we work closely with our security team, and we do a lot of these like AppSec kind of efforts. We also have other tabletop kind of exercises or a strict criteria whenever there's any PII information involved or so. And then we are built on public cloud, so we also have this shared responsibility model where the cloud itself provides some of these things. So that's how we treat it. But I mean, it is something that starts from day one, and security is a big organization, and they play a big part in how we do this.
Cool. All right, going over to the next one right there is, can we expect Netflix original series about the thrilling life of a director of platform networking anytime soon?
I think I know someone who might have added this, but it's hilarious because when I was growing up, I used to think my life should be so exciting that if they made a movie on it, people should watch it. So I would say, why not? If the content team is listening to this, maybe they'll cast me, but no promises.
Cool. Going on to maybe two more last questions here. Time-boxed experiment. Platform MVPs are hard to build with limited time. The MVP outcome could be invalid or a false negative. What is your suggestion on handling those?
Yeah, I mean, this is the whole part of take pragmatic, strategic bets, do all the due diligence that you can do the back of the napkin math, involve your smartest people, make them talk to each other. But then when it comes to it, the hardest thing I feel is people saying no or walking away from it, right? Like people feel once we decided on a mission to go to Mars or whatever that is in platform world, people have to go there, whether it's a good idea or not. So we also look at like what's the point of diminishing returns, right? So is 100% adoption a goal? Maybe not. At 90% you achieved what you want in terms of a business outcome, and there's always going to be those 10% snowflake outliers where pushing the last 10% gives you absolutely no value and just eats up investment. So yeah, it is a true problem. I just think that you have to adapt based on the industry you're in, the stage of the startup or the stage of the company you're in, and put all of that into it. Like it's harder to sell it to maybe a bigger company where there are so many established notions. It might be easier if you're a startup.
Cool. Going on to the next one right here. In the spirit of Netflix algorithms, can you predict the next big hit in the open source world or in the innovation platforms world?
You're really putting me on spot, right?
Yeah, as long as it's not going into anything trade secret.
Yeah.
We will keep it a secret.
I mean, I don't know. Like, there are so many things. Like, you should look up the hype cycle for 2023 by Gartner. That will give you more appealing answers in the platform space. But if I have looked it up, and Gen AI is on the top of it, so no surprises there. To me, it's about, today people are using Gen AI for productivity use cases mostly in platform sense. But when do we start doing more things with it? Like, that's my bet on what might be a great innovation.
Sweet.
All right.
Thank you so much, Shweta,
Thank you
for sharing your knowledge here.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all for all the great questions here.